Welcome to the AEN Stories channel.
I used to think a hero was a man with a shiny helmet and a clean turnout coat. That was the version you see on the department calendar. I had the September slot one year, crouched in front of Engine 2 with my jaw set like a football coach. Folks in Willow Creek kept the page up long after the month passed. You could say I peaked, photographically speaking, near the tail end of fall. My name is Dylan Cooper. I am 41 years old, which is a good age to be a firefighter because you know how to work hard and when to work smart. I can untangle a charged hose in a hallway full of smoke by feel alone. I can sense the moment an attic flashover wants to introduce itself. I can ladle chili for the department fundraiser with my left hand while signing a little kid's plastic fire hat with my right. I grew up here, ran with the Willow Creek Wolves until my knees sounded like someone stepping on popcorn, and landed where I always wanted to be, the firehouse that sits next to the river like a loyal dog. People in town waved at me from grocery aisles and porches. Old men gave me thumbs up. Teachers asked if I could talk to their classes on career day. It felt like I was built for this, like a wrench that fits every nut. Madison came along when I was 30. She had the kind of smile that looks printed on good paper. We met at a charity 5K where I was sweating out 2 donuts and she was gliding, ponytail bouncing like a metronome. She worked in municipal administration, then slid up the ladder into a deputy role with the city's development office. Madison spoke fluent meeting. She could say a polite no that felt like a warm yes. I adored her for that. My job was smoke and alarms, hers was schedules and glass doors and polished wood. I will say something that might not be fashionable. I idealized my marriage. I polished it in my head like the bell on the rig. I pictured us as one of those sturdy couples who stand outside their ranch-style house on Christmas Eve in matching flannel pajamas, holding mugs and looking like a home insurance brochure. She championed my work, at least at the start. She wore a t-shirt with the department logo on Saturdays and told her friends I was a hero. I told my guys she was what competence looks like in heels. Time changed the lighting. You know how a living room feels crowded and cozy at night but looks a little too honest in the morning? The years turned on the fluorescent switch. Madison started speaking of my profession as if it were an adolescent phase I had not yet grown out of. She called late-night calls boy adventures. She compared my pension to the income brackets of people who had never hung from a window frame to hoist a toddler out of a black bedroom. I tried not to hear it, because denial is an underrated painkiller. Then came the charity dinner. The Willow Creek Civic Foundation borrows the ballroom at the old Chandler Hotel every spring. White tablecloths, centerpieces that look like stiff bouquets, a stage with a lectern that gives people courage they do not deserve. I show up every year in the same navy jacket that I pretend is new by pairing it with a fresh tie. Madison bought her dress the week before and walked like a swan through a field of pigeons. We had a table with our names on it in calligraphy. The salad tasted like a garden's handshake. People drifted by to chat. The deputy mayor told me his smoke detector chirped all night and he finally put it in the freezer, which is a crime against both appliances and safety. I laughed politely. Madison sipped her wine and scanned the room like she was counting votes. The keynote speaker, a regional developer with a name like a yacht, told a story about a groundbreaking ceremony and a golden shovel. Applause. Dessert arrived in triangles. A microphone traveled table to table for testimonials. When it reached us, Madison stood up the way performers stand, as if air itself is a stagehand. "My husband," she said, and everyone smiled in our direction. "Dylan has always been passionate." She paused. People leaned in. "He loves his job. He loves the station. He loves his chili cook-offs." Laughter in the polite register. We all appreciate what firefighters do. Truly. Yet there are also choices we make as adults, choices that lead to greater impact. Some of us decide not to stay kids forever. Some of us decide to build something bigger. A hush came down soft at first. She smiled wider, catching the light like a reflector. "I married potential," she said. "But potential is not a career. Sometimes a man can rescue a cat and still not know how to be a husband. Sometimes a uniform covers a lot of unfinished work. So yes, I suppose I married a hero. I just hope one day he becomes a man." Laughter came, not the good kind. The sound in the room turned tinny. I felt the way you do when you stand up too fast and your head becomes a snow globe. The microphone moved on like a lifeboat I could not board. Her phone lit up under the table as she sat. Reflex made me glance. A message from a contact named Jason X fit with a flexing bicep emoji. The preview line said, "Can't wait for later." She put the phone face down, the universal sign for the plot thickens. I excused myself to the hallway and breathed through my nose the way the paramedics taught me. The chandeliers hummed. I stared at a framed black and white photograph of the old hotel lobby and pretended to be in that simpler decade where men wore hats and adultery involved more stationery. When I came back, Madison was finishing her dessert and laughing at something the deputy mayor said. That night in the car she smelled like white wine and satisfaction. I drove. She checked her phone at every red light. I asked who Jason was, not as a prosecutor but as a man who likes his facts right side up. The answer came with a frost on it. A trainer, she said. At CrossFit Lakeview. A friend. This is what insecure men do. They invent soap operas. It is embarrassing, Dylan. I said I did not watch soap operas. I watched houses not burn down. She rolled her eyes at a volume that rattled the glove box. Here's the thing, she said. I need more. I need a partner. Not a mascot. She looked me up and down, turned the dimmer switch on her respect, and added, the department is cute. The parades are cute. The salary is not cute. She smoothed her dress like a verdict. If you do not like that, you can leave. I can find a man who is not afraid of growth. I slept at the firehouse that night. The bunk room has mattresses that feel like they were once enlisted in a war. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, counting the little pinholes in the acoustic tile like they were constellations. The guys pretended not to notice. Breakfast the next morning arrived in the form of coffee so strong it could sand wood. Word travels in a town even when you do not text it. By lunchtime I had a familiar ache in my chest that was not cardiac. It felt like shame and confusion had decided to share a sleeping bag. Phones vibrated. A picture floated through the group chats, a candid from the dinner where I sat frowning while Madison smiled with everyone else. Comment threads sprouted. People had thoughts. A friend from high school posted a cryptic status about respecting first responders and some people forgetting where they came from. My name was not in it, but my face was on it. I walked outside, put my hands on my hips, and watched the river slide by like a conveyor belt of unbothered water. Willow Creek breathed around me. The bar on 3rd Street hosed down its sidewalk. The bakery put out cinnamon rolls that were probably illegal in some states. A woman walking a beagle waved. The wave felt like a pity napkin. That afternoon we ran a 3-alarm at a hardware store where a faulty space heater decided it preferred fireworks. We knocked it down with a beauty that comes only from training and trust. My hands did exactly what they were supposed to do. My brain jogged ahead of the flames and laid out a map. A rookie named Mateo followed me like a shadow and learned about roof ventilation the way you do when your eyebrows are about to vanish. We saved the building. The owner cried into my jacket. I thought, quietly, that maybe I was not a clown. Nights at the station stretch long when you do not want to go home. The couches are lumpy in the exact shapes of the men who have sat on them for 20 years. ESPN murmurs from the wall. Someone always finds a stale donut in a box and argues that the frosting is a preservative. I took the 3 a.m. watch at the front desk just to avoid the part of sleep where dreams try to fix your life. Morning brought the sheriff. Thad Calloway has shoulders that could be repurposed to safes. He has been my friend since Little League, where he hit baseballs so far they caused paperwork. Thad became sheriff because somebody had to be the adult in our class. He walked into the station carrying a paper bag with breakfast biscuits and the look he reserves for moments when people he loves try to self-destruct. "You up early, Chief," he said. He called me Chief before anyone else did, in the way friends bless you with nicknames that feel like uniforms. We sat in the kitchen. Grease paper went translucent under our elbows. "You know how many calls I got about that dinner," he said. "Enough to fuel the economy," I said. "Small towns are water wheels," he said. "Everyone pours in. Everyone gets wet. You want to tell me anything, or you want to stare at that cinnamon roll like it owes you rent?" I told him about the speech, which tasted worse on the second pass, and about the text message, which tasted worse on the third. Thad listened with his mouth zipped. He reached into his pocket and slid a napkin across the table. "This is a dumb question from a lawman," he said, "but do you think she is faithful?" I looked at the napkin like it might hold the answer. "No," I said. Then I felt the floor of that word give way. "Maybe. I do not know." "All right. Separate question," he said. "Has she done anything you could arrest her for on paper, not in your heart?" I blinked. That is an unusual way to offer comfort. "Comfort is down the hall," he said. "I am offering clarity. She is a public official with her hands on a lot of levers. CrossFit Jason trains the son of the contractor who wants the Lakeview Boathouse permit. Your wife sits on the preliminary review committee. Rumor says she fast-tracked something. Rumor might be wrong. Rumor might be a dog that barks at shadows. Or rumor might be the dog that actually smells smoke." I sipped coffee that had achieved the viscosity of motor oil. "So what do we do," I said, "other than get depressed?" "We do not get depressed," Thad said. "We get documentation. We ask questions the right way. We do not become the people who shout in parking lots. We become the people who say please and thank you at the clerk's window. You collect your life back on paper. It is not romantic, but it works." I felt something that might have been hope or might have been the caffeine hitting. Thad flipped open a spiral notebook. He wrote dates and initials with that deliberate cop printing. He is a good man, which is different from a nice man. The good ones show up with pens. So we built a plan, the simple kind that holds. Step 1: lived in public records. Willow Creek is a tidy place on the surface and a filing cabinet underneath. Thad walked me through request forms and timelines. I filled out more paperwork that week than I had during my entire application to the academy. School board minutes, procurement memos, development proposals, emails that had to be dragged into the light by a municipal clock that ticks loudly when you ask the right questions. Step 2: sat in my phone. I downloaded a copy of our home internet history with my name on the account. The world wants you to lie to yourself, but data refuses. I saw search terms that made my stomach do a bareback rodeo: non-disclosure agreement template, how to conceal payments, hotel Willow Creek Chandler gym day pass hours. I printed screenshots and slid them into a folder like I was feeding a quiet animal. Step 3 required me to be a man in my kitchen one evening when Madison came home with the smell of eucalyptus body wash and someone else's playlist. I asked simple questions. She gave complicated answers. I kept my voice cool as the fridge. She turned up the heat and tried to serve me shame like a side dish. "Do you want to be with me?" she said, tapping the basin with a fingernail. "Or do you want to file forms like a clerk?" "I want to be with a wife," I said. "Not a press release." She smiled her shark smile. "If you do not like what you have, you can leave. I will not negotiate with an underachiever." You can always tell when someone is confident you will not call their bluff. It is right there in the posture. I went to the bedroom, put 3 days of clothes in my duffel, and drove to the station. The guys said nothing, the way brothers do when the house is on fire and you cannot find the dog yet. I slept better that night than I had all week. The next days played like a montage if you sped them up, me in a collared shirt at the city clerk's desk, saying good morning like a choir boy, Thad at his computer compiling emails that used keywords like expedite, preferred vendor, and Jason will swing by with the specs, me at a bench outside the courthouse, queuing the documents in an order that told a story without adjectives. There were payments that hopped from a shell nonprofit to a consultancy with an address that matched a storage unit. There were friendly notes from Jason about our Friday strategy session time-stamped exactly 32 minutes before the Chandler Hotel's gym day pass checkout. There were messages from Madison using her city email to coordinate donor hospitality with vendors who somehow won bids at discounts that cost the city money. Thad knows the difference between smoke and steam. He did not rush. He did not lead me with questions that made me say what he wanted. He helped me build a clean line from A to B that even a city council person could follow on a Tuesday night after 12 hours of budget hearings. Word in town did what word does. I heard it at the grocery store when 2 women paused over a pyramid of oranges to discuss how sad it is when a marriage goes cold. I heard it when a contractor winked at me like a guy who thinks a man breaking down is a prank reveal. I heard people call me a loser because there is currency in drama and someone has to be the bill. Every loser has a day when he remembers he is not. It started on a Sunday when we caught a warehouse fire out by the old rail spur. The wind was wrong and the structure was stubborn. A homeless camp behind it became a hazard we had to escort out. A teenage boy with a nose ring tried to run back in for a backpack because his sketchbook was inside. I grabbed him by the collar and said words stern enough to stop a deer. He cried like relief does when your chest unlocks. We knocked it down with a ladder pipe and a sheet of white that steamed the street. My boots squished and my ears rang and I felt brand new the way you feel after a hard swim. Madison's opinion of me could not change the fact that I knew how to do this. The city's gossip could not rewrite the math of fire. I stood there, soaked and smiling like an idiot, and thought, I like this man. I know this man. That is the line I carried into the next Monday, when I drove my truck to City Hall. I wore a suit that fit like good advice. Thad met me with a stack of copies and a grave nod that meant we were stepping onto the part of the trail where snakes sun themselves. The city council meets in a chamber with flags and stern portraits. They sit behind a crescent desk and talk into microphones like pilots. The chairwoman, who once scolded me for parking the ladder truck in front of her bakery, banged the gavel and read the agenda. Madison sat 2 seats down, neat as origami, hair sharp enough to slice cheese. Jason of CrossFit Lakeview parked himself in the back row with a duffel bag that suggested he might drop for burpees at any time. Public comment opened. I stood, walked up, and placed a binder on the lectern. When your job puts you in front of burning things, you learn how to speak through noise. My voice poured out simple. I said I loved this city. I said my father had fished the river here and my mother had taught reading at the elementary school with the mural of the owl. I said I had always respected the process, even when the outcome annoyed me. Then I said there were irregularities in the development office's permit pipeline that looked less like irregularities and more like a system. I gave them the story on paper, with sticky notes marking pages. I did not describe how humiliation tastes. I did not mention hotel gyms. I used exact numbers. I read dates. I paused to let Thad confirm a couple of details as an officer of the law. He did, in that clean tone that makes juries look up from their coffee. Madison spoke when I finished. She moved to the lectern like she was mounting a horse. She said the word context 3 times as if it were garlic for vampires. She said political attacks. She said personal vendettas. She said the development office works quickly because it is responsive to the people. She called me a bitter ex. The room shifted. You could feel people trying on opinions like sweaters. Jason said nothing. He developed a sudden interest in the heating vent. The council went into closed session. The chairwoman asked us to wait outside. The hallway smelled like carpet glue and tension. I leaned against a wall and stared at a bulletin board covered in notices for yoga in the park and lost cats named after desserts. Thad nudged me. You did good, he said. I did okay, I said. You did good, he repeated, in the tone a man uses when he is used to repeating himself to people who cannot accept it the first time. Minutes ticked by with the patience of slow dry paint. The door opened. We filed in. The chairwoman cleared her throat and read a motion written by someone with a law degree and a need to keep their verbs tidy. Madison was temporarily suspended pending a formal investigation. An outside auditor would examine the permit process. The city would request a review by the county ethics board. Jason, who had been quietly tapped for a consulting role on a parks contract, was removed from consideration. He stood up as if the seat had burned him. Madison's face arranged itself into an expression that said both unbelievable and I expected better. She gathered her folder and walked out without looking at me. A few people clapped, then stopped clapping because clapping felt too on the nose for government. Consequences are like rain. They arrive, then they soak, then they seep. The investigation dried out a lot of rocks. Madison's stay in that office ended with a press release that mentioned gratitude for years of service and the need to move forward. Jason posted a video about mindset that did not mention his abrupt hiatus from coaching. People in Willow Creek backed away from gossip the way you back away from a stove you suddenly realize is still on. I kept working. There is no trophy for not setting a town on fire. There is just Tuesday morning and somebody's alarm going off because bacon jumped the pan. My guys cooked me steak on a night shift as a quiet way of saying yes, we watched you take a bruising in public. I kept my head down long enough for it to settle. Then the weirdest part happened. People started saying my name again in grocery stores, only this time the shape of it was different. It had respect in it that did not feel like pity or the cheap high of hero worship. It felt like the town had seen me get up from the canvas. Folks invited me for backyard beers and wanted to talk about fishing and taxes instead of my feelings. Once, a kid asked me to sign his cast, and his mother whispered that she was proud of me in the tone you use when someone has learned to hold a heavy thing correctly. The mayor has a handshake like a handful of pencils. He called me into his office and talked budget and morale. The previous chief was ready to retire to Arizona with a fifth wheel and a supply of sunscreen. The department needed a leader with more calm than swagger. The mayor said a lot of words that were supposed to sound casual and then said the ones that were not, "We would like to offer you the job." I sat there looking at the pen on his desk. It occurred to me that teenage me would have grinned until his face cracked. 41-year-old me said, "I would be honored, because certain phrases you say like you were in church." We shook on it. I walked out and sat in my truck and laughed, a relieved laugh that made me clap my hands like a seal. Then I called Thad. He said he knew it 2 weeks ago and was just waiting for me to stop being surprised by good things. Becoming chief feels a little like going from playing right field to managing the Yankees. Suddenly everyone asks what you think of hoses and hiring and whether the department should have a TikTok. I bought a suit that fit like a promise. I wrote memos that said things like accountability and community engagement without choking on them. I took my mother to lunch at Sal's Diner and watched her eyes shine over a grilled cheese. A man ought to buy himself a present when he crawls out of a hole. Mine floated on water. Willow Creek has a lake that looks like a paint color with a name invented by an ad agency. I drove out one morning in April when the pollen was flirting with everything and walked along the docks with a cup of coffee that steamed like a tiny train. A 22-foot fishing boat sat there like a patient dog. White hull, blue trim, a small cabin that could keep a man and a book dry when the sky got ideas. The salesman said numbers that made my savings account clear its throat. I said the word yes because sometimes you need a vehicle that is not an emergency. The first time I took her out, the motor made a sound that could cure most sadness. The lake wore its best clothes. I steered toward a cove where the sun painted a path and let the boat idle until the silence got friendly. A kingfisher ratcheted by like a little mechanic. I did not think about speeches in ballrooms. I did not think about text messages. I thought about the way water waits and forgives. News gets around the way it does. The Gazette ran a story about a local firefighter promoted to chief despite personal challenges that the writer described in that polite way journalists use when everyone knows who slept with whom. They put my photograph on page 1, helmet under my arm, eyes doing their best to look wise. The comments were, for once, less toxic than a pond behind a factory. Madison did not call. I do not know what story she tells herself. I hope it is the kind that lets her sleep at night. Jason posted a shirtless selfie that got fewer likes than usual. My life did not end up as a country song. My truck still starts. My house became mine again, quieter and a little more honest. I replaced our wedding photo on the mantle with a framed shot of Engine 2 cresting Main Street during the 4th of July parade, flags off the side, kids in red plastic helmets cheering like we were superheroes. People still come up to me at the grocery store. Only now the conversation is better. They ask if the department has enough volunteers, then volunteer. They ask how to keep their porch from catching a breeze and turning into a Roman candle, then buy a screen. The old men still give me thumbs up. One of them added a salute. I told him I am in public service, not the Navy, and he said a salute is universal when a man does right. The firehouse smells like coffee and rubber and 100 jokes that will never die. As chief, I do less crawling and more pointing, but it turns out pointing requires its own bravery. I mentor Mateo, who is going to be better than me in a decade if the world behaves. I make sure our ladders get tested twice as often as the budget requires because ladders do not care about paperwork. I shake hands with kids and hand out stickers and talk with their parents about smoke detectors until I am blue. This is the job. It is not cute. It is worthy. That spring, the city held another charity dinner. The Chandler Hotel ballroom polished itself in the mirror. I dressed alone in my kitchen, tied a tie I did not hate, and checked my phone for alerts that only said ordinary things. I arrived early. The staff recognized me in that way where they are not sure whether to call you by your title. I said hi to the deputy mayor and silently forgave him for freezing his smoke detector in his freezer. People took their seats. The keynote talked about a scholarship fund for EMTs. When the microphone came to our table, I said I was grateful for the chance to serve. No one laughed. They clapped in a way that felt like water finding its level. On the way out, an older woman with the haircut all good grandmothers eventually choose stopped me near the elevators. She patted my arm and said, "Son, life is long. You handled your short with a lot of long in it." I thanked her like you thank a poem. You might ask if I am happy. Happiness is a big word. I prefer words with less fuss, like content, like steady. I am steady. I get up early. I run on the river path and wave at dog walkers who wave back. On Sundays I take the boat out if the weather allows and anchor near the mouth of the creek. Sometimes that brings a cooler and we sit there saying very little because men only have a handful of words in a day and we like to spend them carefully. Sometimes a kid from the station comes along to learn how to tie knots that keep you from drifting. Sometimes I go alone and read a paperback that smells like sunscreen. Every town needs its stories about people who took a punch and then did the dishes. Mine is not complicated. A man marries a woman who loves the idea of him and not the reality. She decides the idea was better. He sleeps at the station. The town watches. The man and the lawman collect papers the way fishermen collect lures from low branches. The council reads. Jobs change hands. The man goes back to work. The town looks at him differently, which is to say more completely. He gets a new title and a new habit that involves a boat and large pockets of quiet. The last time I pulled the engine out for a parade, I saw Madison on the sidewalk across from Sal's. She wore sunglasses that tried to hide a summer. She clapped because that is what people do when the sirens whoop and the band behind you starts Stars and Stripes Forever. Our eyes did not meet. That felt correct. The guy next to her held a toddler who yanked off a fire hat and laughed. The toddler waved at me with both hands. I waved back. That felt better than correct. The river keeps rolling past the station, in all seasons, with that old song it sings to anyone who listens. Water remembers the places it has been and still goes forward. I suppose that is what I am doing, in this town where people love hard and gossip harder, where the hardware store returns happened and the city council felt the weight of paper. I keep a copy of the binder in a drawer at home, not because I want to relive it, but because sometimes it helps to remember how good evidence looks when the truth finally stands up straight. If you ever pass through Willow Creek, come by the station. I will show you the rigs and let your kid try on a helmet that is too big. I will point at the ladder and talk maintenance while you pretend to understand. Then I might point my chin toward the lake and tell you a simple secret. Work matters. People matter. Paper matters. Some days end with applause. Some days end with hoses that need rolling and floors that need mopping. Both kinds are good. On a Friday evening not long ago, the sun slid down the sky like a coin. I locked the station office and walked outside. The guys were inside arguing about whether pineapple belongs on pizza. I got in my truck and drove to the dock. The boat waited, calm as a dog who knows the sound of his owner's footsteps. The motor coughed to life and then purred. I eased out past the no-wake buoys, away from the flicker and fuss of town, until the lake opened up like a big forgiving door. I cut the engine and let momentum carry me. Water smacked the hull in the gentle way that tells you are exactly where you should be. Fireflies found each other on the far bank. Somewhere a grill popped. I leaned back, let the quiet do its job, and felt something ease in my ribs that had not eased in a long time. A man can make it through a lot, if he remembers who he is. I am Dylan Cooper. I put out fires. I show up. I laugh again. I bought a boat. The town sees me, finally, not as a calendar page but as a neighbor who gets the call and goes. That is enough. That is more than enough. Thank you for listening my story. If you want more raw, real, and gripping stories like this one, subscribe to the AEN Stories channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.